Then they beat Tiger. It's fucking Tiger. Look, we all like Urcast. We all like Dobu. But my God, they shit the bed so fucking massively that the bed is broken. Like, the bed is broken. It's repairing that right now. The mattress has to be clean, has to be burned, burn the house down, rebuild it again. I don't know, pick up Annihilation, pick up Score, pick up Rate. Fuck your armor points. I don't want this team to go to waste because I still see potential in Urcast galvanizing the youth of Mongolian Counter-Strikes. I want them to keep on happening. So, yeah.
All right, well, we're back again for another episode of Geographically Challenged. I think number 13 now, so maybe that's unlucky. I don't know. We'll see. I suppose it's been a relatively unlucky week for a few of the teams in the Asian region. A relatively lucky week for some of them as well. It's great to be back. It's great to have you guys back on as well. It's I like the change of scenery for you, Bleh. Things look a lot more like they used to in your bedroom, although it seems like you've joined a gang. So you want to tell me what's going on there?
Yeah, I've joined the Fuck Asian CS Tyloo #1 gang once more. I'm back. I got a cap for that. And of course, the background is gone for now. It was filling up my room. It was 7 by 7 feet. My room is not that big, so it's nice to feel a little airy.
Let me ask you this: what are you planning to do with that now that Digital or Pal Summer 2020 is over? Like, are you going to save it for the next one, or?
I don't know. I'm just keeping it. It's there. It's in the corner right there. I'm just keeping it for, I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe I might go camping one day.
Sentimental
once
value.
Everything opens up. Yeah, but not just that. I could use it for as a tent. It is massive.
All right, Pilsky, what's going on with you? Have you joined the Fuck Asian CS Tyloo hype gang, or what are you up to at the moment?
I have not joined the hype gang. I'm pretty on that China #1 train, to be honest. That seems like a good way to be at the moment. But apart from that, I'm just cruising along as always, my friend.
Yeah, that'll be a discussion that we're going to get into as well, because I think there's probably a few interesting discussion topics around the Chinese teams at the moment, and obviously what's been going on with Pal Summer 2020 and how that's impacting the rest of the scene and what's going on. So we'll jump straight into things here. Obviously, the major news from this week is the Pal Summer 2020. That's basically the only big tournament that's been going on, and Tyloo have won it. So I don't think that comes as a major surprise to anyone. They seem to have been on a bit of an upward trajectory over the last few months or so. They've really been, I guess, the team to beat in the last 2 months, and with the downward trajectory of the likes of Tiger and Vici, it really didn't seem like there was going to be anyone to kind of challenge them, Bleh. I mean, was this sort of your what you sort of thought about when you were watching Pal Summer or casting Pal Summer? Because I guess for me, like, I always sort of thought that this was a foregone conclusion. Like, right from the outset, if you would have asked me who would have won Pal Summer, I was going to say Tyloo every day of the week.
Yeah, I would have said it as well, but I think it was a fashion in which Tyloo had that run in the group stage, which caught all of us by surprise. I mean, they lost to Invictus first game. You're like, all right, fine, it's Invictus. They're a very good team. And on top of that, it's your first showing in the group. And then they went on a a 8-0 streak, like series-wise. They won 16 maps in a row, head into the playoffs. Slow start. That's when things got a little tricky. I think in the playoffs, Tyloo looked very mortal, and it could also be everyone stepping it up, right? But they were also able to go to that higher gear that we've seen Tyloo do time and time again, albeit not in the fashion did during the group stage. Group stage was incredible. Tyloo. There was like clean, solid, great Counter-Strike, and then in the playoffs there was somebody just basically dragging their sorry corpse all along to the finish line, and it was kind of a throwback. It was cool to see, but I wasn't very convinced with the win.
Okay, let me ask you this then: do you think we've seen the peak Tyloo yet, or do you think they've still got a ways to go?
I think they still have ways to go. And I'm liking the direction they're heading towards. It's nothing too complicated. It's nothing too fancy. They are that X Factor team, right? Is going to catch someone by surprise. And what I liked a lot was the lack of respect they were giving to a lot of these teams in Asia, which is how they used to play a couple of years ago. Not, spending much time anti-stratting or coming up with some complicated shit. No, just push on in, just completely dominate them. That's exactly what we saw, and that's good. That won't be enough when they're going to be going towards, to play Pro League or whatever, or for the major down the line. But I'm also assuming that, we had Attacker and we had Summer when they were playing Pro League in EU alongside Zeta and Freeman. I'm hoping that they took some lessons from that and they're going to be trying to kind of inculcate that in this team. But right now what they're doing is trying to make Danking and Slowly feel comfortable in the lineup. And it's very clear that the comms are no longer an issue. Everyone's firing off, and especially Danking and Slowly especially, man, that guy is a find. I feel like, forget Danking, I think Slowly would be the missing link for this team. So there's still a ways to go, but I'm liking the trajectory I find them on right now.
Okay, Pilsky, you're someone that sort of called slowly pretty early on in the piece. I remember when we were doing our Chinese Dream team. From memory, it was actually Nick that put slowly in his team, but slowly was someone that you sort of mentioned was a person that you definitely thought about and had considered putting in your roster. So, I mean, what do you reckon this Tyloo roster looks like without slowly? Let's say they have someone that's, I don't know. I don't want to necessarily throw a name in there because that sort of changes things quite a lot depending on who it is. But how big of a piece is slowly actually in this Tyloo roster based on what you've seen from the likes of Road to Rio and DreamHack Masters Spring?
He just adds more consistency. You always need that stable player in your team that's going to be an anchor and just, brings some stability to the team. And a lot of the time, that's what Tyloo lacks. They have a lot of players historically that are quite aggressive or from time to time can have some role crises. So I think if you bring a player that's got a lot more stability and is going to be very, very consistent and do the same thing time and time again, both in terms of individual performances like frags on the board and just in terms of what he brings to the team role wise, then I think it's going to allow some of your other players who need a little bit more freedom to flesh out their game a little bit more and become better overall. So you're looking at Dan King. I think Attacker's someone that's constantly thrown in the bin whenever you have a bunch of aggressive players on a Tyloo team, because he usually ends up becoming a player who takes the pitch roles and isn't able to live up to his full potential. So if you're adding more consistency in the team, it's going to free somebody like that up. And we've seen that at least earlier on from Attacker in like a DreamHack and then Road to Rio in terms of him having some pretty monstrous performances. But it seems like in this tournament, a much more well-rounded performance from everyone on Tyloo. Somebody's come back up to a decent level of performance as well. Doesn't seem like anyone's really, popping over the top. It seems like everyone's having a pretty decent performance across the board and everyone's contributing.
What do you think about that, Blair? Because to me, it sort of seemed like, I guess to an extent, what Pilsky is saying is true, right? Across the board, the players, in terms of the whole event, seemed to perform well. But there were moments, I thought, where Tyloo sort of required an individual to sort of step up. You sort of mentioned somebody there as well. So, I mean, they're not yet at that level where they're just going to dumpster everyone without someone, not whether it's somebody or not, jokes aside, having that big sort of individual performance, right?
Yeah, and I think that's going to happen more and more as they play better competition, right? Better opposition. And I think Pilsky had the nail right on the head there. Attackers' rise to prominence recently has come in alongside slowly, kind of playing some of these bitch roles, I might say, right? Being the solo side holder or trying to, support his teammates. That's what he does all the time. And I like that. I like having some semblance of sanity in that lineup when you have players like somebody like Danking. Now, speaking of Dank, I know we haven't touched on him yet. He had a comparatively quiet tournament. He had some breakout moments, some crazy rounds here and there. But to me, right now, he's flashy. He's good. He's very sharp. But he's almost like somebody without the genius. Now, somebody without a genius is fucking stupid. And that's what Danking is to me. Like, you just go back and watch some of his VODs, and he just goes to some of the most unnecessarily dumb plays. With somebody, when he does it, you can see some reasoning, some logic, some intuition behind it. And for Danking, it's almost like he's still pugging. It's almost like he's still trying to just kind of force his way to a victory just by out-aiming opponents. And that's not the way this works, not at this level, not against forget EU teams. You can't do that even against Vici or Invictus. And you'll realize many of the rounds where Tyloo lost, which they maybe shouldn't have, was Danking being a little bit too over-aggressive. And that is something which I feel should be reined in a little bit. And I'm going to give them time. I won't lie. Like, I didn't expect this Tyloo to look this good. I thought probably they'd be like, kind of like the Bentet lineup 2.0. But this is, if you ask me, it seems better. Everyone's stepping up. Everyone's looking good, like Pilsky said. At the same time, though, I would like to see them start to include a little bit more of a tactical depth to it, because after this, now it's clear they're the best team in Asia. That's 100% clear. But I want to see them include that right now, starting off right now, a little bit more discipline, because eventually they're going to be playing some EU teams. They're going to be playing some EU events, some big ones. And that is where they need to really show up. And in the current form they are right now, that's not good enough. You might even have all 5 players showing up. Even then, I don't think it's going to be good enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually looking at how Tyloo sort of played in Road to Rio versus how they played in PGL, you are sort of starting to see that little bit of strategic depth or tactical prowess kind of creeping into their gameplay. I think they're meshing a little bit better than they were earlier on in the piece. So I think something that we'll have to keep an eye on when it comes to DreamHack Summer and obviously going into ESL Cologne as well. These are the next 2 kind of big tournaments that we'll keep an eye on for Tyloo. One last discussion topic here for Tyloo, Pilsky. I'll give this one to you. But does it look to you like this Tyloo is kind of more of a long-term play? You know, because I think a lot of the roster changes that Tyloo have made previous to this one is kind of leading them towards a good pickup, a big sort of player, a big player coming into the roster, and they're looking for sort of almost instant success. But I think when you pick up people like Danking and Slowly, and you know, two relatively more inexperienced players within the Asian scene than some of the others that they've had previously on the roster, it sort of leads me to think that they're going to try and invest in this roster for, you know, the longer haul, kind of 12 months or potentially further than that.
Well, they did it at the perfect time, to be honest. If looking back at it, if you're going to incorporate new players into the roster, that's the perfect time to do it. They're already comfortable playing in that environment, coming from eHome and having some good performances online. So I think they're only going to get better. Unfortunately, I think for both Australian and Asian teams, once you know, people are able to travel again and they're able to go to international lands, I think they're going to be very, very far behind the rest of the world initially. Like, especially for those first couple of events, because it's going to be so jarring going back to that. Like, all the EU teams are still practicing the same. Yeah, it's online, but they're still practicing the better teams, and they're even being pushed by some of those better teams as well. And NA teams have some decent practice against like Brazil and whatnot. You know, they have a pretty decent practice group there. Whereas I feel like for Oceania and for Asian teams, it's going to be quite hard for them to go international. And these players have pretty much no experience. So when you're looking at a Tyloo roster, if they're dominating the region, that's fantastic. And then I think it's going to be back to square one internationally, and they're going to have to rediscover their identity. And I think back to square one. I think some of the lessons that they learned from the more experienced players are going to help them when they get to that stage. But I think it's going to be a bit of a process once again.
Okay, so I did say that was the last topic for Tyloo, and I lied. I've thought of another one while you were talking there, and I want to get your thoughts on this one, Bleh, because, you know, Pilsky's sort of alluding to the fact that Tyloo, they have been dominating domestically. They might be able to go overseas and, you know, they'll potentially struggle there. They'll potentially have a pretty decent run. But my question is, right, you know, you seem to be a guy right now that's starting to get a little bit of hope back, right? I've seen your tweets. I've seen you getting a little bit excited. So does the performances domestically give you any kind of an indication? And what I mean by that is, like, obviously you can look at their gameplay and whatever, but I'm more so talking about when I see a team playing domestically and like literally shitting on everyone domestically, that makes me think, oh, you know, there's like another level here for them, right? If I go and look at, for example, in PUBG, the way that an Atletico PUBG roster played in Phase 2, and then they went over to GLL Grand Slam and they kind of dominated the competition and competed very well internationally. So to me, it's like, if I see a team dominating the region, I think, okay, fair enough. Like, I at least give them a little bit of hope. Whereas if they're going close with Vici, if every single map is looking really, really close, I'm sort of thinking like, well, they're probably not ready to make that next step. So is that something that's going through your head, or am I sort of going a little bit crazy? Am I getting a little bit too excited about this Tyloo roster?
I think we need to be restrained with our expectations. I know, a bit rich coming from me, I know, but I like the way they're dominating. I think that's a good sign. The fact that they are dominating without even trying hard, but just as individual players death matching in the server and just owning everyone, it's a good sign. One thing you can't take away from these Tyloo players, individually, they can hold their own against the best out there. I really honestly believe in that fact. Like Danking, somebody slowly, anyone of you guys, even Summer. Like, the cool thing about Summer right now, he's taking a backseat when it comes to fragging, which is so cool to see for someone regarded at one point in time as the best Chinese player. The fact that he's willing to let it go and be the guy doing the utility. He had, like, I think 100 utility thrown in a map in one of the games we saw from Tyloo earlier, which is ridiculous if you think about it. And I feel individually they're there. I like the confidence, the fact they're giving no respect. Now, whether they're going to have the same confidence going against the EU teams, that remains to be seen. Because every time we see Tyloo play against with Captain Mo and DD, we look at when Benton and X-Grid were playing, when we had Freeman and Izetta playing, it's always about them trying to be a little gimmicky, trying to go for these set strats and maybe picking Inferno like 10 times in a row, just trying to be headstrong and be like, all right, we have this particular playbook we have on this map, and we're going to use that against this team. And even if it fails and not able to really adapt on the fly, they might go back to that. I don't know. I'm not in the team, right? I don't know. They might do that. But if we can somehow have them kind of have this style of Tyloo. Simple Counter-Strike, basic Counter-Strike, but it's clean, it's functional, it works. And I want to see this style of Tyloo play against maybe a top 20 EU team and see how it fares. I'm not saying it's going to work, but I want to see how that fares rather than watching them try and do the same fucking execute 10 times over on the same fucking map for an entire tournament, which is what they did in Pro League on Inferno. They picked Inferno every single time and lost every single map in Inferno. And I don't know why, because they weren't playing the way I expected them to. Albeit, yes, there was Zeta. There was always a problem there. There was a caveat there, language issue and whatnot. And I'm sure we read that interview with Zeta, how he said, there was a language barrier, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all expected stuff. But right now, no language barrier, 5 raw fraggers, have a pretty good understanding of how to approach Counter-Strike. 3 players who are veterans in the scene, who've been around for a very long time, have played a lot of international tournaments, who've even tasted quite a bit of success as well. That is all the right elements. Stop overthinking it. Just go on in there and see what you can do. You have nothing to lose. I want them to play the style they're playing right now. Tighten it up a little bit more, and maybe we might see an upset taking place. We might see a little bit of a threat, because again, you got to say, like Pilsky mentioned, how everything's isolated right now. The EU guys are used to playing against EU guys. NA guys don't have much of practice. And then if you look at Renegades and Tyloo, they're the kings of the region. They don't really have anyone to play with. It's very reminiscent of 2015 when Tyloo came about and just like shat on a couple of teams because no one was expecting this sort of like insane style from them. So maybe I see a world, call me an optimist, but I see a world where this Tyloo could be as impactful, maybe not have the success that Captain Mo and DD had, but maybe something closer to that.
Okay, well, I think we'll quote that and see what we get in the next couple of months, years. I don't know how long it's going to take for coronavirus situation to be over, but once it is, I'm very excited to see what Tyloo can do. But I do echo your thoughts. I think they've gotten away with a lot just by having this excuse where they can say, oh, there's the communication issues. Like, yeah, fair enough, that is an issue, but now that you don't have that excuse, we better be seeing something pretty good out of Tyloo when they do inevitably go overseas and play internationally. Anyway, we spent about 15 minutes talking about Tyloo, so let's just start moving on to some of the other teams here that were, a positive surprise, I think. And I've got a question mark here next to surprise. Like, I'm not sure that it's fair to necessarily say that Invictus performing this well was a surprise, Pilsky, because, even you, again, particularly, were talking about them in previous episodes and saying that Invictus is a team to keep an eye on, and now they've finally, by the way, been given the opportunity to actually qualify for one of these fucking events instead of other teams getting invited over them. They've come second in it, so I'm really happy to see Invictus being able to perform this well and kind of proving that they deserve to be here.
Yeah, I think like the main competition for them is like the main like talking point for them is they perform very well against the other Chinese teams and they play them a lot. Like they played them in Weibo and did pretty well, and that was the first tournament where I was kind of keeping my eye on them, and I knew that they had a pretty good lineup. If you look at it, like they have a good sort of core of players that can play pretty decently. I think flying is like. I've been saying for ages, even going back to that old Invictus lineup with the Russians in it, that flying is nuts ever since I watched him play against Tyloo and some of those other teams. I think he dropped like 100 bomb against Tyloo in a best of 3 series way back in the Russian team, and like people legit were just calling him like a cheater, like a blatant cheater with like how fucking insane he was playing. I remember he was like running out T-Con on train against Tyloo and just 4K'ing them with an AK, just one-tapping everyone. I was like, this guy's fucking nuts.
He's still doing it with the Deagle.
Yeah, he's like a freaking insane player. I think Zhao Sage has been very, very solid for a while, even going back to those 5-power rosters. He's a pretty serviceable player. He seems like a good sort of glue player and a field player that can do a little bit of everything. As for like the other player that I sort of keep my eye on when I'm talking about Invictus is that Viva is like, I'm kind of concerned about him because he seems very inconsistent. He seems to shit the bed from time to time and just randomly like minus 25 in a series when he should be one of your better players. So he's someone that I'm worried about because if you're looking at Invictus, Oi and Destroyer, they're decent. They're like okay players, but they're not going to like cut the mustard if, Flying's not having a sick game and if Viva's not playing up to scratch. So the thing that I'm worried about for Invictus is I'm worried about their consistency in terms of going forward into the future. And that's why I would kind of be curious as to what an Invictus Vici shuffle would look like, because I reckon there's a lot of good pieces there.
I was actually going
that could put together a good team.
Sort of lead the conversation in that direction. I don't want to go down there just yet, because I do want to touch on what you just said there with Viva having these sort of inconsistent series. Now, to sort of give you an example of that, in the PAL Summer 2020 Grand Final, he was minus 27 for the series over the 3 maps. So you think, Bleh, if he would have shown up in that game, like Tyloo potentially loses that 0-2.
Yeah, at the same time, like, that's a big if. I completely agree with Pilsky. I think Viva is highly inconsistent, and I'm actually going to disagree with Pilsky on the fact that I think Destroyer, he's a better player than Viva right now. And you can't take that away from him. He's super consistent. I like that. He's not a star player. He's not flying. He's not Chao Sage. He's rarely going to have like a 30 bomb series. But you notice like how sometimes on the CT side, like as an operator, is so dependable. He is so dependable. He can rifle as well. Look at Mirage and Invictus. Like that's a map they're very comfortable on. And you know who's a playmaker there? It's not Viva. It's not Chao Sage on the T side. It's Destroyer. That guy single-handedly somehow just controls the jungle area so beautifully. And I really like watching him play. He's solid, dependable. And I feel right at the core 3 of that team, it used to be Viva, but I can't count him in anymore. The amount of times the team has handed him an AWP on the T side to make something click, and it just fails every single time. Doesn't matter what map it is. And at one point, you got to ask yourself the question, this event had, what, 40... 45, 53, 54 best of threes. That's a lot of games, man. And they played about 12 best of threes over there. And in that, Viva just kept disappointing me. Yeah, they might have had a couple of good games against fucking Bren or Mosley. Doesn't fucking count. When it comes down to really mattering in that grand finals, who stepped up? It was Destroyer. It was Chao Sage. It was Flying. Where was Viva? Nowhere to be found. So I agree. Even Oi as well is a big question mark for me over there. But that is Invictus, right? That is what they are. And I don't know if they want to really switch anything up right now. We all know the peak that Viva can hit, but it's just something needs to change. I don't know where. I don't want to really change anything up because I like the way they play Counter-Strike. They seem like a good hybrid between the aggression, the pure talent of Tyloo, and kind of a semblance of structure that we see from Vici, along with an in-game leader who can actually fucking frag. So I like where they are right now, but also I can see the flaws. It's very, very evident where the problems lie.
Okay, so I want to go towards Vici then. We've sort of talked a fair bit about Invictus. And after we talk about Vici, then let's talk about this theoretical amalgamation of Invictus and Vici. So I feel a little bit bad about every time, you know, Pilsky, every time I start talking about Vici and I throw you this question, it's like, I'm always saying the same thing, you know, like, is there anything new to say about Vici over the last 3 months? Or is it just that same downward trend and there's nothing interesting to really talk about apart from the fact that they seem to be shitting the bed when it really matters?
Yeah, I mean, they're just wasting Jam Young's potential, really. Like, he just needs to get himself a better team at this point. Like, they're still, like, one of the better teams in Asia, but just nothing to excite me for Vici at the moment. Like, it's why I'm kind of like the state that Vici's in, and then looking at a team like Invictus that I reckon if one player sort of starts to have a downward trend, they wouldn't be as good, and how inconsistent Tiger is. It makes me question Tyloo a little bit, and it makes me question the whole scene. Whereas, like, I'm trying to work out if everyone's super inconsistent at the moment, and it's just like, it depends on if someone's going to get like, if you have that key player with the 0.10 higher rating or whatever for that a tournament, they do a lot better. And like, I feel like Invictus is an example of that, but as for Vici, I feel like their individuals are like not good enough at the moment, and they still win against the other teams in Asia. So it's just like, it's super sad state of affairs that they're in a situation right now where they're good enough to beat the rest, and also they have the RMR points, right? So they can't really do anything at the moment. Like, they're still top 3 every tournament, man. So.
Yeah. You say that they do have the RMR points, but what does that matter when Tyloo's in front of them and Tyloo's winning everything anyway? Like, maybe it's time to just rip the band-aid off for Vici. One thing before we do get into that sort of rabbit hole is, you know, Bleh, we've obviously had our discussions privately about what's been going on with the veto in that match that they played. So what do you think about, like, can you really, you know, like, okay, let's just go from the start here. We have been, I would say, one of the biggest proponents of Advent. You know, we've been a big fan of Advent. We've talked very positively about him in the past on these Geographically Challenged shows. But I don't know if you can continue to make excuses for him, right? If he's not fragging, if he's not doing correct vetoes, if Vici's not winning, if the Vici's not winning series where they should be winning series, like, can you continue to make an argument to keep him in the team?
That's a good point. That's a very valid point. The thing, I mean, I'll touch upon that particular statement, that particular question, but just going back a little bit, right? Like for Vici, what's a win condition? Kaze, Jam Young stepping up, and Orman or Zoking having a good game, right? That's a win condition. If one of those things are not there, they fall apart. Look at Tyloo. Look at the finals. What happened there? Forget the final. Look at Beyond, that game against Beyond and Inferno. Everyone shit the bed. Everyone. And the lowest 2-rated players in the entire tournament in the past couple of months, Somebody and Summer, they dropped 30 bombs, 230 bombs to drag Tyloo over the finish line. That is the difference. That is the depth of talent that Tyloo have, despite lacking all the, the strats and whatnot. And now coming back to your question, Elfish, like if you look at, for example, that map Vito against Invictus, why the fuck would you ban out Mirage? You're good in Mirage. Are you going to be that weak-minded that, having losing to Divine Vendetta and Mirage 16-13 just broke you completely like that? What sort of a team are you in that case? Are you really a winning team in that case? You banned Mirage, you allow Dust to through, which Invictus are of course going to pick, and you've never played a map on this in the past 6 months, more than 6 months, 7, 8 months maybe, going back all the way to October 2019. You get shit on it, and you're going to pick Nuke. You are by far the best team on Nuke in the region, the entirety of Asia, and you decide to go Vertigo. What sort of bullshit is this? This is you just being a bunch of pussies, right? And with that mentality, are you going to beat Tyloo? No. Are you going to beat Invictus? No. You're just allowing them in. Here's the funny thing, Jordan. I feel that if Vici had played Nuke and Mirage or Nuke and Inferno, if the Inferno was in that pool over there, they would have still beaten Invictus. That's the tragedy of how Vici fucked that veto up so badly. Now, coming back to the question, is Advent any more deserving of the praise? I still feel he is to a certain degree, but at a certain point, I feel he's been given too much of freedom to work with. At one point, like you said, you need to rip off the bandage, change something up, sit back, become a coach. Right? You can coach. Right now, it's an online season right now. You can coach and be calling for the team at the same time. You can kind of groom another player to be your replacement in the server. This is the perfect opportunity to do that. Number one. Number two, you can probably replace either Zoking or Almond. Look, I know they have the 30 bomb games. I know Zoking plays a very, very hard role being the hard entry, but one of them has to go, and you need someone like a Flying coming in. You need a trio. You can't have Zoking and Almond together in the same team. I know that they have their pros. I know how good they can be at times, but they're too wildly inconsistent to enable to win some of these big games. So you need to make these changes. Now, I don't know who's going to make a call here. Is it Vici the org? Did it have a general manager? Or is it Advent? I have a feeling it is Advent because of how long he's been in this lineup, and he makes the decisions when it comes to kicking players out or picking up someone like Jam Young. So, yeah, I still believe he has what it takes, but he needs to take some very, very hard steps right now.
All right, well, let's make this a thing then, right? We weren't initially going to do this as a segment or anything like that, but I am quite interested in seeing what your thoughts are on this VicInvictus roster. I've written VicInvictus or InVicitus. I don't know what we want to go with there. Both of those names don't seem to really roll off the tongue too well, clearly. But either way, Pilsky, let's have a bit of a chat here. You were the first one that brought this up, so I do want to start this with saying, I think we would build this from the ground up. Let's take this from the Vici perspective, right? Because theoretically, they're the team that has the buying power. They're the bigger brand name than Invictus, at least in Counter-Strike, although arguably in other titles.
Invictus is massive.
Yeah, Invictus is massive as well. But let's for the sake of argument, say that we're sticking with Vici as an org. Now, I think if you're sticking with Vici as an org, the only two players that are a lock to stay right now are Kaze and Jam Young. And I even sometimes have this thought in my mind where, do we overrate Kaze and Jam Young just by virtue of the fact that people like Advent and Orman and Zoking aren't getting really any frags? So there's just a little bit more to go around for people like Kaze and Jam Young. Is there a world where that's a thing as well, and maybe we're overrating them as well?
No, they're not overrated. They're fucking solid. They're really good players. I think the thing that pisses me off about Kaze is that he is the epitome of the most consistent stat-wise player you're ever going to see. But then you watch his demos or you watch him play, and it's you could tell a massive difference between Kaze, who's feeling confident and who's ready to bang, and Kaze, who's just kind of showing up on the day. It's a difference between him going and picking up the rifle and running into a bomb site, or him going for some aggressive ult peaks, and him just holding lines and playing not to lose kind of thing. And I think that's a big difference between a Vici that wins series and loses series. An example of that is I think it was that DreamHack event where Tyloo were up like 2-0 and Vici clawed 2 maps back and Kaze was just running around shooting everybody, like dropping 30. That's like an example of the difference between the Vici team when Kaze's on and he's not on. I think I did want to say just before we like come up with theoretical lineup is you got to like think of the inter-team dynamics when you think of like weird vetoes and weird decisions that happen in the team. A lot of the time it does. I mean, this has happened to me in the past when I've played on a team, is that when your team's losing faith in the in-game leader, or you're having a period of a downward trend or a dry spell, sometimes the players will get in your ear. Sometimes you'll lose confidence. Sometimes you make some dodgy decisions when you're not confident and you're having a questionable run of form. And I would say that's probably what's happened there. Maybe even Vici's being smacked around by Invictus a bit in practice or something like that. That's the only explanation I can come up with for that veto, because it's obviously pretty abhorrent. Like there should definitely be some different map choices, and they shouldn't be removing Mirage ever. But yeah, like I would say that it's going to be a psychological or an interpersonal thing that's happened with that veto and that whole performance in that series based off a lack of confidence.
Definitely seems like a bit of a mental boom, right? Like the way that I sort of phrased this when we were talking about it earlier in the week was I feel like it was kind of like a panic veto in a way. They feel like, oh shit, our Mirage isn't that good. What are we gonna do? Like let's veto Mirage. Like what else? What more have we got to lose? Because they've tried it and it hasn't worked, I guess. And so anyway, what's your Vici Invictus team here then, Bleh? Like if you have to go and name a 5, or at least give us like the uncuttables. Like who's definitely in your roster?
Are we limited to these 2 teams only?
I don't think Tyloo's going to give up anyone.
No, I'm not talking about Tyloo, but
other Chinese teams, other Chinese players, maybe.
I mean, it's up to you guys. Like I have been doing this on the fly, so
I'd just throw in. It's pretty simple for me. I'd get in Xiaosage. I would get in. Obviously, have Mr. Flying in the lineup. It's a Flying Xiaosage to replace Zouking and Almond, Kaze, and of course you have good old Mr. Jamyang. I'd still keep Advent around. I can't really think of a good enough. I can't think of a good enough replacement. Because when it works, it's phenomenal. And I want to see Flying under Advent structure, because you got to remember, with all his flaws, the way he sets up players like Kaze, it's great. Like he feels so comfortable at times. Yeah, maybe not in Mirage CD set, for example. Apart from that, he does a very good job setting up and unlocking players. Look at how Jamyang just blossomed as not just. And the cool thing about Jamyang, you watch him play. And you're like, this guy's been playing easily like 3-4 years in a pro scene. No, right? He's just a pug star, just came into the scene, and he looks so good the way he plays. Very Robs-esque in his approach to Counter-Strike, which is so cool. And I feel it wouldn't have happened if he joined, let's say, a Tyloo, if he joined, let's say, any other team apart from playing under Advent's wing. So yeah, Xiaosage, Flying, Jamyang, good old Kaze, and Advent. Maybe, I see a world where maybe Xiaosage might be replaced by some other player in the region. I'm not sure who, though, because he is getting on with the age, and I'm not sure he can continue his form a couple of years down the line. But I'm not sure who I would pick, Pilsky.
Yeah, it's like a hard team to make. I feel like even with these 2 rosters, you're almost missing a 5th player somewhere.
Yeah,
like it's easy to put 4 people together, but I feel like there's a piece missing somewhere, because every roster that you put together is like 2 people that play the same role, or there's too many aggressive players, or there's too many passive players almost. I think like you do. I would agree with Blair's lineup, to be honest. I think I would go for Flying, Xiao, Advent, Jam, and Kaze probably.
Tasteful
but
name.
I feel like that's an incomplete lineup almost. It's like someone has to make a compromise, and that's probably why I put Xiaosage in with Advent, because I think Xiaosage can be quite a good glue player, to be honest. He could do a bit of everything, and he can definitely thrive in some awkward situations. I've definitely seen him clutch. I think Jamyang and Kaze are incredibly consistent, and then Flying is like, that's like a player that can pop off for you, and can also occasionally, if you need someone to go in and get some kills, the man can do it. So I think that's a good enough team, to be honest. I think that's enough firepower. And I think that Kaze, Jamyang, and Flying have all sort of proven themselves, as well as the Xiaosage to some extent, even just being a middling sort of player. They've all sort of proven themselves enough in the consistency department that you can make up for someone being a bit of a liability fragging wise if they continue that form.
Yeah.
Where it gets worrying is if someone like Flying falls out of form, or the roles don't quite work correctly. I'm almost tempted as well. The other thing I was thinking of just while we're on this topic is I'm almost tempted to put Viva in the team with Advent, because I almost feel like Advent could actually get into play well more consistently. Maybe it's like he just hasn't really had a proper in-game leader who's fully focused on that to take like the best out of him.
So what
But
you'd have
at
him
the
instead
same
of
time,
Xiao
you'd
Sage.
have to take out Kaze, or you'd have to get him playing a role that he's not playing at the moment. And he's
Maybe-
already struggling as it is. So
Maybe Advent as an active coach, like it's online CS, right? He could be in-game leading, calling as a
ideally,
coach.
yeah.
Ideally, at least for the online phase for the next few months, I think that could work. Get Viva in and let Advent just take a back seat, but call actively, and hope that the new players coming in actually listen to him. I think that's been the biggest problem.
That's a team that can beat Tyloo.
Okay, so then just to clarify, our dream team of VicInvictus or InVicitus, whatever. I'm trying to get it right.
Vicious. There we go.
InVicitus is what I was looking for. Anyway, doesn't matter. That team is Xiao Sage. I've got them all wrong. Xiao Sage, Kaze, Jam Young, Flying, and then Advent or Viva, depending on how we're feeling.
Yeah, I think the dream one is like Advent as coach, and you bring Viva in, but you've got to like have Advent in Viva's ear, telling him that he's Pog champ like every day, and like getting him to like be in the entry pack probably. How aggressive is Xiao Sage playing lately? Is he more of just like a hold position kind of player or a supportive player? He needs to be the glue guy. Like you can't expect him to do
aggro.
Very
He's
much.
not an aggro guy. You usually see someone like, I think it's perfect. Like Oi is hyper passive, right? He's super passive, and sometimes he just gets overrun. He struggles holding it in a solo bomb sites, for example. Flying is a perfect mix, and I think I agree with you. I think the problem with Viva is there's too many people telling him that he's Pog champ. So he just feels he is Poggers and just runs on in and just gets pogged in the head, which is unfortunate for him. But I feel he needs to be restrained a little bit more. And which is surprising because you have Xiao Sage next to him and you watch Xiao Sage play. There is a reason why he's so consistent. Even when Flying has a bad day, Xiao Sage doesn't. There's a reason for that. And it's not about him being an in-game leader, setting himself up for success. He does take some of the rougher roles as well. It just, the maturity, I guess, he's getting on with the years as well. I think he's just a very smart player. And I just hope that it kind of rubs off on someone like Viva. We know the promise he has, but I don't know. Xiao Sage is playing right. Just answering your question, Pilsky. Xiao Sage is not being hyper aggressive. He's no longer Xiao Sage like 4 or 5 years ago. He's playing very, very smart individual Counter-Strike. But for some reason, Viva's just not listening to him. Or maybe he is. I don't know.
Okay, that turned into a massive, massive tangent, but I think it was really interesting, to be honest. So I'm pretty eager to see what's going to happen in the future for both of these two teams, because I almost feel like their fates are, in a way, intertwined. Like, if Vici makes a change, they're going to be looking to poach from Invictus. If Invictus makes a change, they could potentially look to poach from Vici as well. It's not like they're a small organization either. And maybe then they can take that second place sort of title, I guess, within Chinese Counter-Strike and indeed within Asian Counter-Strike as well. So I suppose we'll revisit this topic in a few months when one of these two teams inevitably does make a change, because I really feel like, at least as far as Vici's concerned, there is a storm brewing. Maybe we'll be wrong. Maybe we'll be right. Find out, I guess. One more thing to touch on before we move off of PAL Summer 2020, or a couple more things to touch on, to be fair. One of them, on a good note, it seems like Thai CS is back to at least a decent level, right? The performances that Beyond put in, giving me a little bit of a look here, Bleh. So at least they managed to make top 4 in this tournament. I think that's actually good from Beyond, at least as far as the result is concerned. You can give me that much at least.
Yeah, but how? How did they get there? Let's do the math, right? They're better than all the SEA teams right now. That's easy. Like, who's there? Paper X, dead in the water. It's literally like dead in the water right now. You look at Lucid Dream, well, they're non-existent right now. You have Sigma. They've been struggling in fighting Lucid and Beyond. Even Lucid, the new Lucid, is a team that could beat Sigma. So Sigma, I don't really fancy them doing anything much. Bren, some glimpses, but don't have the individuals. There's no one else. Are they the best team in Southeast Asia? 100%. But that's nothing to be proud of. Then they beat Tiger. It's fucking Tiger. Look, we all like Urcast. We all like Dobu. But my God, they shit the bed so fucking massively that the bed is broken. Like, the bed is broken. It's repairing that right now. The mattress has to be clean, has to be burn the house down, rebuild it again. I don't know, pick up Annihilation, pick up Score, pick up Rate. Fuck your RMR points. I don't want this team to go to waste because I still see potential in Urkas galvanizing the youth of Mongolian Counter-Strikes. I want them to keep on happening. So yeah, the beat Tiger, when Tiger shit the bed, messy game, like horribly messy game. I had the misfortune of having to try and narrate what I saw. And trust me, Elfish, like, I struggled.
You're just a fucking Thai hater. That's all it is.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. They had a spectacular map against Tyloo. One map. Okay. Inferno was fantastic. They went balls out. They didn't give a shit. Like, dicks out, wagging around. Like, my dick's bigger than yours, Tyloo. Fuck you. We're gonna fuck you up. We're gonna play you the way you play us. And they took the fight with them. And it took somebody just ascending to some level of godlyhood to drag Tyloo over the finish line, including Summer dropping 31 kills, right? 230 bombs from 2 Tyloo members, and out of 3 weren't that terrible either in order to win the game 16-14. That was an incredible map, and I'll give it to Beyond. That they really took the fight. They really impressed me a lot. And for me, I feel like that was the barrier breaking, the mental barrier being like, oh, we can't beat these Chinese teams. No, they came in to win, and they showed up. I was very impressed with that. Then what happened map number 2? Got chat on. What happened against Vici? Got chat on. So yeah, they had one good map. I'll give them credit. Apart from that, no. They're not there yet, guys. Stop being me. Stop being me. Rein it in. Be sane. Be sane. Be logical. One
thing that I sort of, I feel like at least one map something, right? Like, I'm just trying to grasp at some straws here, I suppose.
Fair.
But
one map something.
You got to think about how shit Thai CS has been since we started hyping them up. We hyped them up so much at the start when we
it's all your fault, you know that, right?
Episode like fault. 1 to 5 of Geographically Challenged, we're like, yeah, man, Thai CS is going to be the next best thing. And then they just shit the bed. So maybe I'm just trying to vindicate myself a little bit here. Pilsky, I know you didn't watch too much of PAL Summer 2020, but at least this has got to give you some sort of element of hope that, yes, Lucid Dream is dead. We'll talk about that a little bit later on as well in this episode. But at least Beyond is competing.
Yeah, they're not going to do anything until Myrols and Olivia get back to where they were. Like, these guys are just shadows of their former self. If you look at their stats going back to like last year and then compared to like 2020 and how things have been going, they just really are not good anymore. I don't know what the fuck happened. Olivia might have been the best player in Thailand for like the longest time, simultaneously in-game leading and AWPing and absolutely shitting on everyone. Fucking incredible player to watch. Can clutch, can do everything. He hasn't fragged in ages. He's like terrible this year. I don't know what the fuck happened to him. As for Myrols, he was good in the Orc meta. And he actually was like looking like a pretty decent anchor player, but he hasn't played well in ages. STK is a fucking fragger. That dude's crazy. And QQ's pretty good as well. KNTZ has never been a player that you want to rely on to frag. He's just a role player. But really, this team's performance is down to the underperformance of 2 of its longest standing core members. And that, at the end of the day, that's what's happened. STK's turned his career around. Can you imagine Beyond when Myrols and Olivia were like in their form last year and STK's playing right now? Like, you time machine that together, they would be shitting on people. That would be really good. But I don't know what's happened to these couple of boys. All I'm going to say is that I've clicked on a few streams lately with some Thai players playing Valorant, and it's not just Lucid Dream players that are playing that game. I'll tell you, I've seen all kinds of the Thai boys all playing Valorant lately. So, I question how much these guys are playing and how much they're trying to improve and stuff. I know they're playing I think they were in a house together at one point, but the individual performance of some of the lads just really hasn't come up to par. Lucid Dream's pretty dead. It needs to be a reshuffle at this point if anything's going to happen.
It has been a while, hasn't it? It's been a little while.
Some people need to go take a big, hard look in the mirror at themselves because they really haven't been there lately. Well, and it's sad to see.
I think it is high time that we put the Thai teams in a bit of a blender because that used to be the whole storyline. 2018, 2019, every single competition you would see a Thai team in, you'd be like, oh, I remember Beyond from last comp, and then you'd realize that it was actually, some other team. It was like Maple or Alpha Red or some shit. So it's been a little while, we've had some pretty consistent teams from the Thai region. let's chuck them all in a blender and see how we go.
I just wanted to add on to what Pilsky said about Olivia, right? He still steps up against the middle of the pack teams, against the lower tier teams, the ones that Beyond should be beating. But when it comes down to facing Tyloo, Tiger, Vici, Invictus, the big four, basically, he just disappears. I don't get it. He's just not there in a server. Someone that impactful not showing up is so surprising, and which is even more damning because you have fucking KNTZ and SDK just being like super reliable, super consistent against the better opposition. So I don't know. I don't think it's just Valorant. I think it's like a mental thing at this point for Olivia. Meryl's, it's kind of hit or miss, but Olivia, he's been consistently bad against good teams. If he had shown up a little bit against Tyloo and Map 1, even if Beyond had lost that series, they would have lost 2-1. They would have taken Inferno 100%, but he was nowhere to be found. So I don't know. Something missing in that lineup.
Okay. I'm still at least holding on to something for TyCS. I think Beyond is the only representative now. Like Lucid Dream, obviously out of here. Zigma.
Yeah.
Still haven't seen enough from them to really get too excited. So I think if TyCS is going to make something happen, it's going to be from Beyond, and hopeful. I'm hopeful. Let's just put it that way. Now, what I'm not hopeful about, and something that I'm sure you're ready to unleash about as well, Bleh, is Tiger. So we, again, have perhaps gone and run away with a bit of a hype train a little bit too soon, because Tiger, when they won Road to Rio, they won Weibo Cup, I thought, great. Here's a team that's going to compete with the Chinese teams at the top level of the scene and make something interesting happen. And now they don't even manage to make it into the top 4 in PAL Summer 2020. So, what was it, just Tiger just shitting the bed, like disappearing? Like, what happened to Tiger here?
I don't know. Like, I hate using the word like fluke or whatever. And they played well. I mean, they won RMR, the first one. You got to give them that, right? Then they won the Weibo Cup. Again, impressive performance. But then they didn't get into Pro League. What did we do? I went on a fucking massive rant saying, oh my God, they shut on everyone else. And you come into this event, slow starts happen. They hadn't played Pro League, so there was a slow start. I was like, that's completely fine. It's understandable. But then some of the wins they had, some of the messy losses, the games against Murazrai and D13, I mean, that was just painful to watch. And that is not what we're expecting from Mongols. Like, having a bad game should be the outlier than, them having a convincing game. They had how many convincing games? I think they had wait, let me just take a look quickly. They had 1 or 2 games where they were very, very convincing. And that was against, I think, one of the Thai teams, and I think it was against Bren, I think. Wait, let me just take a look real quick here. But it just so disappointing. Okay, they lost to Bren. They fucking lost to Bren. They lost to Divine Vendetta. And then they beat Vici, which was fucking impressive. But it was also, I think, Kaze having his worst game in 5 years or something. They lost to D13, 2-1 against Murazrai, like a team who couldn't even make it into the fucking playoffs. I mean, what is going on? At this point, it's not about an underperformance. At this point, we just have to take a serious look at this team, or rather they have to look themselves in the mirror and be like, are we really as good as we think we are? Maybe it was actually a fluke. Maybe it was an overperformance and other teams underperforming in the previous Road to Rio. Because that's the only event I'm going to go with. The Weibo Cup, it's fine and dandy. But the Road to Rio, that's where everything's on the line. Money, the RMR points, that's more at stake. Tyloo, that was a new lineup. They just lost Zeta. They just lost Freeman. Vici, where, well, they were looking shaky. And then on top of that, there was no Invictus. The other teams were struggling a little bit. Lucid Dream weren't necessarily in a good spot. They also had his 2 Thai players. So it was a much more weaker pool of teams. And now you come into this RMR, which had everyone from Asia, and they shot the bed. Top 8 is not good enough as a defending RMR champion. And now going into the next events, I don't know, man. I feel Beyond's better than them right now. They've beaten them already, and I feel they're better than them right now. Maybe, I don't know, like Bren with a couple of switch-ups could be better than this team. And I feel I know they're not going to make any changes, but I would like them to bite the fucking bullet and pick up those 3 new kids. Pick up Score, pick up Annihilation, pick up fucking Raid, keep Orcast, keep Dobu. You know what? I even have my doubts about Dobu. Keep anyone else. Maybe keep NCL. I think he's more consistent than Dobu right now. Keep that. That team could shit on some people. That team could fuck with some people. And you have Urcast right there with the brains. That's good enough, because this is not working out. And I don't see it working out again, because it's not just been 3 or 4 months. We got to go all the way back to August, that August lineup, which I think was founded near August last year. It's almost a fucking year. What do you have to show for that? Like, it's kind of failed, guys.
You have anything you want to throw in here, Pilsky? Bit of a reaming from Bleh, so I don't know if you want to go too hard on Tiger here.
Look, all I'll say is that they're meant to be one of the better teams in Asia. The pool, there was a lot of beatable teams here, and they went 12 and 14 in maps. Like, that speaks for itself. Like, there's nothing else you really want to say there. If they're going to make changes, I think the only people you can really justify is picking up probably Score. And then I think Annihilation, maybe. I don't actually rate Ray. I think he's young and I think he's decent, but I don't think he's as good as Score is. I think Score's the standout player. I think Annihilation is decent.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the players on Tiger already are pretty decent. I would probably put Annihilation in the AWP role, and I'd probably put Score in there over. The thing is, Urcast time and time again has not committed to in-game leading. So
he doesn't want to in-game lead, I don't think.
He doesn't want to in-game lead, so you have to keep NCL probably.
Yeah. Fair, I can work with that.
So yeah, that's probably what I would do. I would change one, maybe two players. I don't think they need a crazy drastic shape up. But like I said, the only thing that I do want to stress is that this was a decent field with a fair amount of weak teams, like the Thai teams, Marzalai's in there. And they went 12 and 14 in maps, and it's not like they had a particular weak point in their map pool. They lost all over the place. Like, they're losing all of the maps. There's not a single map they're consistent on. So it's very worrying to diagnose the issue when the player stats are all decent. Like, you look at their individual statistics, they're all pretty decent, but they're just losing all over on the maps.
Okay. On the topic of the roster change, I did my second part of the In Retrospect with Urcast today, and I'll give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek. It's not coming out until Saturday, so this is releasing on Thursday. I'll try and remember to put a little link in. If I can't put it in, just look up In Retrospect with Urcast Part 2 if you want to hear this word for word. But Urcast actually said that when they were trying to find their players to replace Zilkenberg and News after August was created and when they ended up making the team with NCL and 9, they actually wanted Annihilation instead of 9. But NCL was on a team with 9, and he said basically, like, 9 comes as well, or like we're a package deal, essentially, was the implication. So theoretically, they already wanted to have Annihilation on this Tiger roster. So I don't know, maybe that's something that will rear its head again later on down the track. Either way, I don't know if we're at the point yet of saying Tiger needs to make changes. Like, I'm going to give him another couple of tournaments, right? I'm fully on board with Vici needing to make changes right now. But Tiger, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. We'll have to wait and see. Either way, let's have a little bit of a quick chat here. Top 4. I mean, this is just supposed to be very, very quick. So your very first initial thoughts. Top 4 in Asia right now. Let's go Pilski first.
Tyloo, Invictus. I don't know if Invictus is necessarily better than Vici yet. I think they're played better at the moment, but who knows how that will pan out. So it's definitely Tyloo, Invictus, Vici, and I guess it's Tiger. To be honest, like, you just can't say that they're not good when they did so well in that when they won Weibo and they won Road to Rio. I know it's a different era, but they're still individually solid across the board. And I haven't seen enough consistency from some of these other teams to know if they're going to really push it up into the top 4 yet. Like, D13 is still all over the place a little bit. Divine Vendetta, I don't even know. So that would be my top 4, but we'll see how it goes.
So you're still sort of leaning a little bit more towards the past performances, which I tend to generally do as well. Like, when I'm making a power rankings, like, definitely got Tyloo at the top. I've probably still got Vici in number 2, Invictus probably in 3, and then Tiger in 4. Do you agree with that, Bleh?
Yeah, can't really take away from that. Now, the only caveat there being PAL 2020 was a very long event. It was a month-long event. It had more games than three tournaments put together in Asia.
Could have been 3 or 4 Road to Rios, really, in the amount of games that you had.
Easily, right? And that's why I want to put a little bit more emphasis on this event, because a lot of those games, but then again, now you might throw in the counter argument that a few of those games are not really relevant. Once you're qualified for the playoffs, you didn't necessarily have to win. So not all the games, that's against the problem with the round robin format, right? So Keeping those two factors in mind, I'm going to agree with you guys. I don't want to take away the previous accomplishments. They still show that when they can get going, they can get going. The way they smashed Vici, I think, is a prime example during the group stage. So yeah, Tyloo #1 clearly, Invictus #2, Vici #3, and Tiger barely holding on to their fourth spot, beyond right beneath them, just like.
Yeah, I'm going to say that there's a few teams that can sort of just swap places there, like Vici and Invictus, very, very close together right now. Could be 2 or 3. Depending on how some of these tournaments coming up go. Same for Beyond and Tiger. I think they're very much in a bit of a discussion. Short of that, I don't think that there's much like past that, but we only wanted to talk about the top 4 anyway, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about that. Let's move on from PAL Summer 2020, and there's not too much more to the rest of this episode, just a couple of things to kind of touch up on. The first of which is the Funspark Ulti 2020, which was announced over the last couple of weeks now. This is supposedly a $300,000 LAN that was supposed to take place in December, the very start of December, which would have been fucking awesome, by the way, because it would have had international teams. It would have been in China. Tyloo and Furia were invited. It's an 8-team LAN. 4 teams qualify through, so there's 2 more potential invites. I'm not sure who they'll go to. But based on what's been happening, obviously, with the coronavirus, it seems like that's going to be rescheduled probably to early 2021. But hey, a $300,000 tournament in China, can't complain about that too much. Maybe that's going to be the first event that we see Tyloo going to and playing with this new roster against international teams. And if they can do that on home turf, Bleh, I think that's probably the best possible scenario that they can do it in, as opposed to having to go over to, like, ESL Pro League, I guess, is potentially in that discussion as well, but who knows when that's going to happen, if that's going to happen. So I think this would be the perfect test for the first time with this Tyloo roster going internationally in their home country.
Yeah, I would love to see Art and somebody go at each other. Like, can you imagine the absolute fucking chaos in a server? Like, that'd be fun. Jokes aside, yeah, I think this will be the earliest. I don't really know if it's going to happen. I won't lie. I'm very pessimistic about any events happening this year, right? Especially in China and whatnot. But yeah, hopefully it does take place. I'm good. I'm happy to see some events taking place, right? At least there is something to look forward to. Yeah, it might get postponed indefinitely. Might get postponed like a few months till everything's a little bit more normalized. But it's not like events are getting canceled. We didn't have Extreme Stand happening this year. There are no Asian minors happening this year. Like, there's nothing in the region to really fight for. So this event being there, it gives something for at least the top 4 or 5 teams to really look forward to. So yeah, I'm excited. And even looking at some of the teams participating in the qualifiers for EU and NA, there's some pretty tasty names right there. So I hope this event really comes to fruition.
By the way, I did also read about a domestic LAN tournament in China that's supposedly going to be going ahead as well in August.
Like a home cup sort of thing.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting. That's called CSGO_Pro House, which I guess you can look at. There's an article on HLTV if you're interested in it. Yep. It's kind of a small sort of a thing, but it's got Tyloo and Invictus both invited. So maybe
we'll see that.
Yeah, get Vici. Be pretty interesting. 1-3, maybe might be pretty interesting to have them there as well. Either way, I mean, there's not too much to touch on, obviously, just getting that information out there for anyone that was interested about this potential upcoming tournament. But realistically, we don't even know if it's going to happen this year. It probably won't. The other thing that we do know that's going to be happening, though, is ESL One Cologne has moved online. So that shouldn't be too much of a surprise to anyone at this point. But that'll be taking place on, between 18th and 30th of August. So I get a birthday surprise of being able to cast a Asian Grand Final on my birthday. So that's going to be great. Looking forward to that.
Hey, was the grand final on my birthday? I don't think the grand final was on my birthday, but we're both birthday casters.
I have been for the last 3 years as well. Every single birthday I've been casting for something. Either way.
Birthdays for me. Yeah.
It's just the esports life. Anyway,
it is.
20,000 for ANZ and for Asia. Obviously, basically the same thing as DreamHack Masters Spring and DreamHack Masters Summer. So that's the TLDR for that. Tyloo and Renegades have been invited. The rest of the invites are supposed to be coming from the world rankings. Now, not sure how that's going to work because as far as I know, none of the Asian teams or ANZ teams are on the ESL world rankings at the moment. So we'll see who they end up inviting. This could go really, really badly. I thought I saw somewhere, though, that they're taking a bit of importance from the PAL Summer 2020. So we might actually get a pretty decent at least invites from the Asian
Jordan,
region.
If they invite Lucid Dream, I will lose my shit. That would be like the perfect example of how they don't really pay attention to region. Like, yeah, we're gonna invite Lucid Dream. That
Hey,
a good
guys.
run. Like, they don't even exist anymore, guys.
Our
They don't
team's dead,
exist
by the
anymore.
way, and Lucid Dream's invited.
But they'll play anyway. They'll be like, oh, we're dead,
Of
but
course they will,
we'll
yeah.
play anyway, I guess, and then just.
Oh,
get
we're
shit on.
actually a team. Not on this game, but we are a team still.
Yeah. Have you guys heard of Valorant? Maybe you should run a couple of tournaments for that. Anyway, that's a perfect segue then into, obviously, we need to talk a little bit about Lucid Dream. Now, as far as I understand, the org is what has left. The CS team still remains partly intact. I'm told, or I've read in a CSGO to Asia article that John Olsen has moved to Valorant. So Mac's basically going to go jump off a cliff because that's his favorite player from the Asian region. He's got nothing left to live for. What does this mean for Thai CS? I don't know. Maybe a couple of these players are on the market, Pilski. I don't know if Beyond's potentially looking at making some roster changes. I've heard that PTC has got some offers outside of Thailand as well. So I think there's a world where we see a few of these players still sort of sticking around in Counter-Strike.
John, I'd rephrase that question of Pilski with John Olsen joining Valorant as, what does that mean for Thai Valorant, Pilski?
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like maybe they could be quite good in that game, but I'm not going to say anything. We'll talk about it after. Okay, I have something to talk to you guys about, but I'm not like, I was watching some of the streams and stuff, and yeah, like I saw some pretty questionable stuff. I don't know if they're just messing around, but you know, we'll see how they go on that game. Anyway, I don't know, like this Lucid Dream roster, like John Olsen was probably the standout. PTC is like wildly inconsistent, right? From their last roster, CBBK is playing Valorant as well now. The main pieces you would get are that core three: John Olsen, PTC, and CBBK. Two of those players you can't get. So, like, what else is there really to say? Like, yeah, there's still a bunch of the lads on both Beyond and Lucid Dream and Sigma that are like role players, and they can hold their own. They're decent. But I think in Thailand now, I used to feel like you could put 3 teams together and they could be competitive. Now I think you're struggling to put one.
Yeah.
With the talent that's left over now, and the form of some of the players that are meant to be star players is terrible.
Not a good look for Thai CS. Either way, hopefully those guys are going to be able to find some future somewhere, whether it's in Valorant or Counter-Strike or whatever. Let's move into the viewer questions segment. Now, we only have one this week. That's from Murazrai again. So second time for Murazrai asking a question. Appreciate it. Always gives us something to chat about. And this question is, from a viewer's perspective, I personally view Divine Vendetta as the second coming of Absolute, in the sense that you get a team from a lesser region putting up a performance above expectations. Now, that's probably like one part to discuss. And then he says, does that hold true in terms of gameplay as well? Which I think is probably going to be a bit of a harder one to sort of quantify, because it has been quite a while since we watched Absolute play. But let's get your thoughts on this one first, Bleh, because you're the one that's most recently cast Divine Vendetta. I think, like, as far as, you know, what he says initially about whether or not it is the same kind of a sense, like what kind of opinion you form of the team, I probably have to agree. Like, I think they're a team that comes from a region that doesn't seem to get that much light. Same for the Japanese region. Absolute. No one really cared about Japanese Counter-Strike, let's be real. And yet they seem to kind of punch above their weight.
They do, and the only difference here being in Japan, Absolute really didn't have any competition. I don't think Ignis even came close to being as good as Absolute. But if we look at the Middle Eastern region, I think it's really hard to gauge who really is the best team in the Middle East right now. Now, the obvious answer would be Divine Vendetta, but if you look at the Middle East as a whole, you're talking about like Jordan, you're talking about so many countries out there, like towards, you know, Palestine, Iran, Iraq, you have North Africa, for example, which is a part of MENA, and you have so many good players out there. So we don't really know, because of all the ping issues and whatnot, who's the best team. But one thing we know are there are a lot of teams in the region compared to what it was in Japan. So there is a clear difference there between Middle East and Japan. Coming to performance, I agree. One thing I liked about Absolute was how they weren't just like YOLOing it, like how many of the Southeast Asian teams were. They had a game plan, they had a structure, and they were punching above their own weight on LAN as well, which is very impressive for me. They were showing up in that, I think it was a Face It minor LAN, where they surprised a lot of people with how they're playing Counter-Strike. When it comes to Divine Vendetta, look, the caveat is it's all online, right? But also they're playing with a ping disadvantage. There was a lot of, I wouldn't say accusations, but excuses being thrown around by some of the Mongolian teams. Like, oh, we're playing at like 110 ping while they're playing at like 70, 80 ping, whatnot. Pokemon was playing 100 ping from Pakistan. So these are like, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. But given the circumstances, have they performed? Yes, they have. You can't take it away from them. It wasn't the ping that won them some of those games against the Mongolian teams. They played better Counter-Strike. When they played Tyloo in both the games, despite losing 0-2, they made Tyloo sweat a bit. They made Tyloo have to take them seriously. They have a deceptively really deep map pool, surprisingly. Like, you have Train played once, you have Overpass played once, but it's kind of like this surprise pocket picks, and boom, they smash teams on it, right? They destroyed D13 on Train. That was so impressive. It wasn't like 16-13, it was 16-7. Like, I was blown away. I'm like, wow, they have a game plan, they execute it. Do they make mistakes? Yes, they do. Like every other team playing in PAL 2020. But at the same time, yeah, I really look forward to seeing more from them. I think Tyke and Davdov have really been a surprise for me. They had a slow start, but going to the tournament, they started building up their confidence. They weren't playing scared, which is so cool to see when you're facing off against a team like Tyloo. And I really hope to see them play a LAN soon. It's a tragedy that we couldn't see Camel Riders play in the Asian Minor, but I also think it was a blessing in disguise because we saw Camel Riders play in the first RMR. They brought in Havoc replacing Misty. They got a coach as well. And this looks much better than Camel Riders a few months ago, right? So maybe it was a blessing in disguise. Maybe the team is looking better because it's stuck together for a while. Because what do we see from most Middle Eastern teams? They qualify for a minor, they get shit on, they come back, they break up. It's always a pug team. But this time around, because it's a longer duration of a qualifier, they're sticking together. And I'm liking what I see. I really do.
What do you think about these guys, Pilsky? I know we haven't been able to cast any of the Divine Vendetta games, so you might not have too much to touch on here, but surely you sort of see those conclusions being drawn between the at least the way that the perception is of Divine Vendetta and Absolute.
I think I don't really agree with that. I think it's comparing apples and oranges, to be honest. Absolute's a team that they sort of were just average for a very, very long time. And when they did get some upsets, they were like winning 16-14s, or like they were doing they would finally struggle one across the line against a decent team. And they would just perform decently, and they would play very safe, structured Counter-Strike. They would have some pretty okay players, but they were never like, incredible to watch or anything. They were always just very, very sensible stuff. Whereas this Divine Vendetta team, there's no consistency for them. Like, they're all over the shop. Their results are, they're beating Mongolian teams 2-0. So look, I'm not going to say anything about the ping, but they beat all the Mongolian teams 2-0 in this tournament. And then they're losing to teams that, if they're really at the level where they are punching above their weight and they're contesting Tyloo, Vici, and Invictus like we've seen, why aren't they beating the teams that are worse than that? Because they never beat the Thai teams when they should be beating them, So there's no level of consistency with this team. We haven't seen them on LAN like Absolute. I'd say, yeah, it's cool that they're a contender from a region that is not really, got that depth of talent in that region. But it's a completely different team to Absolute. And I think if they really want to hit another level, they're not going to have an opportunity to play on LAN, and maybe they'd be better on LAN with the ping at disadvantage. But if they really want to hit another level, actually start consistently beating the teams that you're meant to, and don't just be those one upset, heroes where you're actually pushing a team that's much better than you, that's not studying you. When we get a couple months down the track, consistently beat these Thai teams and these SEA teams, consistently beat these lesser Mongolian teams, and show that you're better consistently. And when other teams start to study them, they, let's not see a downward trend in their performance. That's what I'm wondering.
Sort of seems like a lot of these questions could be answered by a LAN. I almost feel like the online era experiment, I'm happy, I'm done. We've found our findings. And now it's time to go back to normality, right? Let's get an Asia Minor, something like that. I know it's going to be crazy. It's going to be a whole year without an Asia Minor. So it's going to be a while, I think, before we answer any of these questions. Like, imagine Vici on LAN right now. Would they be as good as they were earlier on this year? Would they be as bad as they are now? I don't know. I guess that's something that we're always going to be left wondering. But let's put an end to that experiment. What I will do as well, though, is very quickly just give a quick shout out to Skyboy, who had a question for us in episode 12 about Taiwanese Counter-Strike. Now, we've gone direct to the source. We spoke to Kang, who is someone that we know. He's obviously very, very in-depth into the Taiwanese Counter-Strike region. He's from Taiwan. So we had a bit of a chat with him on Twitter. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to that. I'll put a link to the description if you're interested, Skyboy or anyone, if you want to follow up on that discussion that we had last week. I don't think there's too much that we can really read into there. Obviously we've given our thoughts, and I think you probably should take the information from Kang more so than from us, because he knows what he's talking about. But that is going to be the end of the episode again here for Geographically Challenged. So number 13, done and dusted. Pilsy, let's go to you first for the final thoughts.
It's been so long since I've casted a game of Counter-Strike. We have the player break. I haven't been hired for anything. I'm just sitting here wasting away in competitive ranked queue of Valorant. It's a horrible way to be. Please hire me. I'm dying out here.
It's kind of like a man running through the desert looking for water, except it's a guy just going through the internet looking for games to cast, and there aren't any. So you can follow PilskyCast at PilskyCast. Make sure you hit him up on Twitter and send him some work or something like that. Anyway, Bleh, you've probably had too much work. So what do you reckon? Are you still on the RS for Events hype train, or?
Yeah, 100%. Like, never say no to it, right? So what else do we have going on in life? I have nothing going on in life. I have alcohol. And now that PAL 2020 is done, I'm wondering and debating what I have remaining ahead of me in the near future days. So yeah, I think all of us could get hired. There's a lot of opportunities, a lot of potential tournaments about to come out in the region. So yeah, hire us, you cunts, and follow us as well.
Maybe there's a chance for an OnlyFans. Either way, you can hire Official Bleh, at Official Bleh on Twitter. You can support me on Twitter at Elfishguy. Support me on Patreon. Haven't got any Patreons yet, but that's all right. We'll get there one day. It'll be like Bleh's OnlyFans. Something will happen. And make sure you like and subscribe and give us whatever comments and questions you have, because we're very interested to answer all of your burning desires about the Asian CS region. But that's the end of episode 13, and we'll see you next time.
Fuck Asian CS. Everyone shit the bed. What sort of bullshit is this? Why the fuck did they shit the bed so fucking massive? This is you just being a bunch of pussies. You get shit on it? Fuck your RMR points. I had the misfortune of having to try and narrate what I saw, and trust me, Elfish, they didn't give a shit. Dicks out, wagging around, my dick's bigger than yours. Fucking impressive. Filling up my room with 7 by 7 feet. My room is not that big. And boom, Asian CS consistently bad.